The story of Japan is often seen through the image of the samurai. These warriors, with their special armor and swords, have captured imaginations all over the world. But their world did not appear from nowhere. It was built upon thousands of years of history. To truly understand how the warrior class came to be, we must travel back in time. We must look at the beginnings of Japanese civilization. This journey takes us through old times, each one adding something new to the culture, way of life, and government of the islands. From the first people who hunted and gathered to the fancy people in the court of a golden age, the path to feudal Japan was long and complicated. It is a story of changing, creating new things, and slowly forming a special identity. This journey begins in the very old past, with the Jōmon people. They were Japan's first inhabitants, living in a world of thick forests and many seas. Their culture lasted for thousands of years, showing how strong and clever they were. Then came a big change with the Yayoi period. New people arrived, bringing with them the secrets of growing rice and working with metal. This changed the land and the way society was set up. After this, the Kofun period saw the rise of strong family groups who showed their power by building huge burial mounds. These times, one after another, set the stage for the first central government and the start of an imperial court that would define Japan for hundreds of years to come. Understanding this old history is very important. It explains where Japanese beliefs came from, why rice is important in the culture, and how a social ladder developed. New ideas from mainland Asia, especially from China and Korea, caused big changes. Buddhism, a new way of writing, and ways of governing were all brought in and changed to fit Japan. These foreign influences mixed with old traditions to create something completely new and uniquely Japanese. The fights for power between family groups, the establishment of an emperor, and the eventual weakening of central power are all key parts of this big story. They are the important chapters that come before the time of the samurai. So our exploration is not just a simple telling of dates and events, it is a deep look into the very heart of Japan. We will follow how a society grew from small, scattered groups of people looking for food to a complex imperial state. We will see how technology, religion, and government worked together to shape the future of a nation. Each period shows a different piece of the puzzle. The Jōmon show us a strong connection to nature. The Yayoi bring in competition and how communities organize themselves. The Kofun and Yamato periods show how power works and how states are built. Finally, the Heian era sets the stage for what happens right before the samurai appear, getting ready for a new chapter in Japanese history. Our story starts with the Jōmon people, whose name means cord-marked. This name comes from the distinctive patterns they pressed into their pottery. These early inhabitants of Japan were not farmers in the way we often think of ancient peoples. Instead, they were skilled hunter-gatherers and fishers. For over 10,000 years they thrived on the rich resources the Japanese islands offered. The forests provided nuts, plants, and game like deer and boar. The seas and rivers were teeming with fish, shellfish, and sea mammals. This abundance allowed them to live in settled communities for long periods, which was unusual for hunter-gatherer societies. Their lives were deeply connected to the cycles of nature. The Jōmon lived in communities of pit dwellings. These were simple but effective homes. People would dig a circular or square pit into the ground and then build a roof over it with wood and thatch. This design offered protection from the cold in winter and kept the interior cool in summer. At the center of the village there might be a larger communal building, suggesting a strong sense of community life. They gathered here for ceremonies, to share food, and to work together. Archaeological sites show villages of several dozen homes, indicating that these were well-organized communities where people cooperated for their mutual survival and prosperity. Life was lived collectively with shared responsibilities and resources. Jōmon pottery is one of the most remarkable achievements of this era. It is among the oldest pottery in the world. These clay pots were not just simple containers for cooking and storage, they were works of art. The early pots were functional, but over time, the designs became incredibly elaborate. Potters decorated their creations with intricate cord-marked patterns, swirls, and dramatic flame-like rims. These flame-style pots from the Middle Jōmon period are particularly famous. They show a high level of artistic skill and a desire to create objects of beauty, not just utility. The pottery tells us that the Jōmon people had a rich spiritual and ceremonial life, valuing more than just basic survival. The spiritual world of the Jōmon is hinted at through other artifacts they left behind. Small, stylized human-like figures known as dogu are found at many sites. These clay figurines often have exaggerated female features, leading some scholars to believe they were linked to fertility rituals or represented goddesses. Many have been found broken, suggesting they may have been used in healing ceremonies, where a part of the figure corresponding to an injury was broken off. The Jōmon also practiced ritual tooth extraction and buried their dead in shell mounds or pits, sometimes with grave goods. All of this evidence points to a complex society with deep-rooted beliefs about life, death, and the supernatural world around them. The long era of the Jōmon came to an end with the arrival of new people and new ideas. This marked the beginning of the Yayoi period, around 300 BCE. These newcomers, who likely came from the Korean peninsula, brought with them a revolutionary technology: wet rice agriculture. This was a complete game-changer for Japan. Instead of relying on foraging and hunting, people could now cultivate their own food in irrigated paddy fields. Rice provided a stable and storable food source that could support a much larger population. The entire rhythm of life changed, now revolving around the seasons of planting, transplanting, and harvesting rice. This agricultural revolution laid the economic foundation for all of Japanese society to come. Along with rice farming, the Yayoi people introduced metallurgy. They brought the knowledge of how to work with bronze and iron. Bronze was used primarily for ceremonial objects. Craftsmen created beautiful bronze bells called dotaku, mirrors, and weapons like daggers and halberds. These items were not typically used for fighting but were likely symbols of power and status, used in religious rituals to ensure a good harvest. Iron, on the other hand, was used for practical purposes. Iron tools such as axe heads, hoes, and knives were much stronger and more efficient than the stone tools of the Jōmon. This made it easier to clear forests for farmland and to build more sophisticated structures, accelerating the transformation of the landscape. These technological changes had a profound impact on society. The shift to agriculture meant that land became the most valuable resource. Communities grew larger and more permanent, often building their villages in lowland plains suitable for rice cultivation. To protect their land and their precious grain stores, settlements were often fortified with moats and wooden fences. This suggests that conflict between communities was becoming more common. Society was also becoming more stratified. Some people accumulated more wealth and power than others, perhaps by controlling the best land or the distribution of rice. A clear social hierarchy began to emerge, with chieftains or leaders at the top, a departure from the more egalitarian Jōmon communities. The Yayoi period was a time of rapid social evolution. The population grew significantly, and distinct regional powers began to form. Chinese historical records from this time, such as the Weiji, describe the land of Wa, which is an early name for Japan, as being divided into over 100 small countries or chiefdoms. The records even mention a powerful queen named Himiko, who ruled over a federation of these chiefdoms called Yamatai. She was said to be a shamaness who used magic and ritual to maintain her authority. The Yayoi period, therefore, was not just about new tools and crops. It was about the birth of a more complex, organized, and politically competitive Japan. Following the Yayoi period, a new and distinct era emerged around 250 CE. It is called the Kofun period, named after the massive burial mounds, or kofun, that powerful leaders built for themselves. These tombs are the most striking feature of the age and a powerful symbol of the political changes taking place. The mounds came in various shapes, with the most impressive being the keyhole-shaped tombs. Some of these are enormous. The Daisen Kofun in modern-day Osaka, believed to be the tomb of Emperor Nintoku, is one of the largest tombs in the world by area. Building such a monument required a huge amount of organized labor, demonstrating the immense power of the ruler who commanded it. These great tombs were not just burial places, they were political statements. They declared the authority and prestige of the ruling clans known as Uji, and Uji was a powerful extended family group that controlled territory and people. They were led by a chieftain who also often served as the chief priest, linking political power with religious authority. The size and grandeur of a clan leader's kofun reflected their influence. The tombs were filled with valuable grave goods that the deceased would need in the afterlife. These included iron weapons and armor, bronze mirrors, jewelry, and pottery. These items showed the wealth of the clan and reinforced their high status in both the earthly and spiritual realms. Among the many clans competing for dominance, one emerged as the most powerful, the Yamato clan. Based in the fertile Yamato plain near modern-day Nara and Osaka, this clan gradually extended its influence over other clans in central and western Japan. They did this through a combination of military strength, strategic alliances, and clever political marriages. The Yamato leaders did not rule Japan as absolute monarchs. Instead, they presided over a confederation of clans, granting titles and status to other clan leaders in exchange for their loyalty. The Yamato chieftain eventually took on the title of Okimi, or Great King, the forerunner of the Japanese emperor. Their legendary lineage was traced back to the sun goddess Amaterasu, giving them a divine right to rule. Lining the outside of the kofun were clay figures called haniwa. These were simple, unglazed terracotta sculptures in the shape of humans, animals, houses, and boats. They were arranged on the surface of the mounds, perhaps to guard the tomb or to recreate the world of the deceased. Haniwa, depicting warriors in full armor with helmets and swords, give us a clear picture of the military equipment of the time. We see armored horsemen, known as kofun, who were the elite fighters of the era. The presence of horses and advanced armor shows the strong cultural and technological influence from mainland Asia, particularly from the kingdoms of Korea. This connection was vital in shaping the military and political landscape of the Kofun period. As the Kofun period progressed, the Yamato clan consolidated its power, transitioning from being the leader of a loose confederacy to the head of a more centralized state. This transformation was, heavily influenced by ideas flowing in from mainland Asia. One of the most important developments was the formal introduction and adoption of the Chinese writing system. Before this, Japan had no written language. Writing allowed for the creation of official records, the drafting of laws, and the administration of a more complex government. Scribes, many of whom were immigrants from Korea, became essential figures at the Yamato court. This new tool of literacy was a massive step towards building a sophisticated bureaucratic state modeled on the powerful empires of China. Alongside writing came the profound influence of continental religions and philosophies. While native Shinto beliefs, which focused on the worship of nature spirits or remained important, new ideas arrived. Confucianism offered a model for social order and ethical governance, emphasizing loyalty, filial piety, and hierarchy. These principles were very useful for the Yamato rulers as they provided a philosophical justification for their authority and the structure of the state. The idea of a virtuous ruler who governed with a mandate from heaven resonated with the Yamato court's efforts to establish a legitimate and enduring dynasty. These concepts began to shape the relationships between the ruler, the nobles, and the common people. The most transformative import, however, was Buddhism. It was officially introduced to the Yamato court as a gift from the Korean kingdom of Baekje in the mid-6th century. The arrival of Buddhism sparked a major debate and even conflict among the powerful clans. The Soga clan, who were strong advocates for the new faith, saw it as a symbol of advanced civilization and a source of spiritual power that could protect the state. They clashed with conservative clans like the Mononobe and Nakatomi, who feared that worshipping a foreign deity would anger the native Shinto. The Soga clan ultimately won this struggle, and with their victory, Buddhism began to flourish under court patronage. The adoption of Buddhism had far-reaching consequences. It was not just a religion, it brought with it new forms of art, architecture, and philosophy. Magnificent temples began to be built, requiring new construction techniques and artistic skills. Buddhist priests and artisans from the continent brought with them knowledge of sculpture, painting, and temple design. The faith also introduced new ideas about life, death, and the afterlife, which coexisted and sometimes blended with older Shinto beliefs. The Yamato state's embrace of these continental systems, writing, Confucian ethics, and Buddhism, marked its arrival as a serious regional power and set the stage for even more dramatic reforms to come. The period from the late 6th to the early 8th century is known as the Asuka period, named after the region where the Yamato court was based. This was a time of intense political and social change, driven by the powerful Soga clan and their championing of Buddhism. Under the leadership of figures like Soga no Umako and the influential Prince Shotoku, who served as regent for his aunt, Empress Suiko, Japan took decisive steps toward creating a centralized government based on the Chinese model. Prince Shotoku is a legendary figure credited with promoting both Buddhism and Chinese ideas of governance. He is said to have been a devout Buddhist who wrote commentaries on sutras and founded several important temples, including Horyuji, one of the world's oldest surviving wooden buildings. A key event attributed to Prince Shotoku was the issuing of the 17-article constitution in 604 CE. This was not a constitution in the modern sense, but rather a set of moral and ethical principles for government officials, heavily influenced by Confucian and Buddhist thought. It emphasized harmony, obedience to the sovereign, and the importance of duty. For example, the first article states that harmony is to be valued. The document sought to subordinate the powerful, semi-independent clans to the authority of the central ruler. It was a clear attempt to replace the old clan-based political system with a more organized bureaucracy, where officials were chosen for their merit and loyalty to the throne, not just their birthright. The drive for centralization continued even after the Soga clan's influence waned. In 645 CE, a coup led by Nakatomi no Kamatari and Prince Naka no Oe overthrew the Soga. This event marked the beginning of a series of sweeping changes known as the Taika reforms, meaning the Great Change. These reforms were a direct and ambitious attempt to remake Japan's government and society entirely along the lines of China's Tang dynasty. The private ownership of land by powerful clans was abolished. All land was now declared to be the property of the emperor. The government would then allocate this land to peasant cultivators in a system designed to ensure a steady stream of tax revenue for the state. The Taika reforms also established a new administrative structure. The country was divided into provinces and districts, all overseen by officials appointed by the central government. A new and more systematic tax system was implemented, with taxes paid in rice, textiles, or other products, as well as a requirement for labor or military service. These reforms were a direct assault on the power of the old clans. While the clans were not completely destroyed and many of their leaders were simply absorbed into the new system as officials, their independent power base was severely weakened. The Asuka period, therefore, represents the critical moment when the foundations of the imperial Japanese state were truly laid. The culmination of the reforms started in the Asuka period was the establishment of Japan's first permanent capital city in 710 CE. Before this, the capital was moved every time a new emperor took the throne, often due to a belief that a place was polluted by death. This practice was impractical for a growing bureaucratic state. The new capital was named Heijo-kyo, and it was located in the modern-day city of Nara. It was a grand statement of imperial power and ambition. The city was carefully planned as a grid, modeled directly on Chang'an, the magnificent capital of Tang China. It featured wide avenues, palaces, government offices, and great Buddhist temples, all arranged in an orderly fashion. For the first time, Japan had a true urban center. The Nara period, which lasted from 710 to 794 CE, was the golden age of state-sponsored Buddhism. The emperors, who now used the Chinese-style title Tenno, meaning heavenly sovereign, became fervent patrons of the faith. Emperor Shomu in particular ordered the construction of a network of provincial temples throughout the country. At the center of this network was the great temple of Todaiji in Nara. This temple housed a colossal bronze statue of the Buddha, the Daibutsu. The project was so massive that it nearly bankrupted the state, but it served a powerful political purpose. It was meant to unify the country under the spiritual protection of Buddhism and to display the immense power and piety of the imperial family. The fusion of political and religious authority reached its peak. Life in the capital city of Nara was a world away from the villages of the countryside. The court and the aristocracy lived lives of luxury and refinement, adopting Chinese fashions, music, and customs. This was also a time of great intellectual activity. The government sponsored the compilation of Japan's first official histories, the Kojiki, or Record of Ancient Matters, and the Nihon Shoki, or Chronicles of Japan. These works were written to legitimize the rule of the imperial family by tracing their lineage directly back to the sun goddess Amaterasu and recounting the myths and history of Japan from a Yamato-centric perspective. They provided a foundational story for the Japanese state and a powerful ideological tool for the rulers. Despite the grandeur of Nara and the apparent strength of the imperial state, there were underlying problems. The system of land allocation and taxation, known as the Ritsuryo system, began to break down. Peasants struggled under the heavy tax burden, and many abandoned their assigned plots of land. To encourage the cultivation of new land, the government began to allow for the private ownership of reclaimed land, first temporarily and then permanently. This policy was exploited by powerful nobles and large Buddhist monasteries, who had the resources to develop vast private estates called shuin. These estates were often tax-exempt, which meant that government revenue began to decline, slowly eroding the economic foundation of the centralized state. The long journey from Japan's prehistoric past to the end of the Heian period is a story of profound and continuous transformation. It begins with the Jōmon, whose deep connection to nature and stable hunter-gatherer lifestyle established the first communities on the islands. Their world was fundamentally altered by the Yayoi, who introduced the rice-based agriculture and metal tools that would become the bedrock of the Japanese economy and the source of new social hierarchies. This set the stage for the Kofun period, where powerful clans vied for supremacy, displaying their authority through monumental tombs and embracing the military technology of the continent. The rise of these clans marked the beginning of a process of political unification that would define the next several centuries. The consolidation of power under the Yamato clan and the subsequent creation of a centralized state were driven by the wholesale adoption of ideas from China. The Asuka and Nara periods were defined by this effort to build a sophisticated imperial government. Buddhism provided a new spiritual and cultural framework, while a Chinese-style bureaucracy and legal codes attempted to bring all land and people under the emperor's direct control. The establishment of a grand capital at Nara was the ultimate expression of this imperial ideal. Japan was no longer a collection of warring clans but a unified state with a divine sovereign at its head, a member of the community of civilized nations of East Asia. However, the Heian period revealed the limits of this centralized model. While the imperial court in its new capital of Heian-kyo reached unparalleled heights of cultural refinement, its real power slowly slipped away. The elegant courtiers who wrote poetry and obsessed over aesthetics were increasingly disconnected from the realities of the provinces. The economic foundation of the state withered as tax-exempt private estates, the shuin, grew in size and number. This shift in economic power from the center to the periphery created a power vacuum in the countryside. The central government could no longer guarantee law and order far from the capital. It was into this vacuum that a new figure stepped, the samurai. Hired by provincial landowners to protect their interests, these warriors developed their own code of conduct and a fierce loyalty to their local lords. As the authority of the court weakened, the power of these provincial military families grew. The story of ancient Japan, from the Jōmon potters to the Heian courtiers, is therefore the essential prologue to the age of the samurai. It created the economic, political, and cultural landscape upon which the warrior class would rise to become the new masters of Japan, ushering in a feudal era that would last for the next 700 years.